I forgot my little cup. Brooks usually so good.
We always have extra like blankets.
Darn,
Good evening and welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. We will start with going around and have everyone introduce themselves, say your name and your role in the district. Make sure that you speak loudly and clearly so that the microphones can pick you up because this meeting is also audio recorded. So I'm Kim Baker, Chair.
I'm Bill Humgen. I'm the Executive Director of Business Services.
Steph Cass, Executive Director of Communications. Brenda Albrecht, Executive Director of Administrative Services.
Brian Thompson, School Board Director.
Carly Anderson, School Board Director.
Terry Lynn, Vice Chair, School Board.
Kathy Lewis, 194's representative to ISD 917.
Mike Favor, Superintendent, ISD 917, and guest.
Joe Berquist, Lakeville Arenas Manager and guest.
David Anderson, School Board.
Bree Shinley, School Board.
Emily McDonald, Assistant Superintendent.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
Doug Van Zyl, Superintendent of Schools.
Thank you very much for those introductions. We'll go ahead and get started with items that we have for discussion. The first would be our guest, Dr. Faber from 917, kind of giving us an overview of his program.
I'd like to just start by introducing Dr. Favor. We hired him at 917 after a fairly rigorous superintendent search. He has a background of having worked at Monticello as an interim superintendent, and he's also been at Robbinsdale, that's the one I forgot, but Roseville. And that's where he worked with Superintendent Sicoli, who was also previously at Burnsville. And he's come out of North Dakota and North Dakota State, played football in the Hall of Fame. And we are absolutely thrilled. His work has been not only in coaching and working with students, teachers, staff. He's just been a great addition to 917, and we've had a lot of great work and progress with him. So there you go.
That was quite an introduction.
Yeah, you got a lot to live up to.
Well, we're very proud. We're very
Hall of
proud you
Fame.
chose us
All right.
to join us.
Are you in the Hall of Fame?
See what you have to follow up, Jill.
Is that again?
Yeah,
I missed the two.
and you're just Jim. Just Joe.
Well, thank you for having me here. Traditionally, go to every district once a year. Just kind of check in, give people numbers, give people updates on what's going on at 917. I'm excited about 917 and what I believe is possible. I can just get some more staff, paraprofessionals. So
Yes.
if you have any to share, please send them our way. I don't know if my presentation is up.
Should be. Kim will go
She's
check for you.
checking.
Oh, hang on one second.
Sorry about that. But just kind of give you an overview of 917.
That one's not his.
We can share.
Swap presentation.
We, an intermediate, we kind of come together to provide services from everything from students with special needs to ALC and career and technical education. Many of our students that we work with are medically fragile or are dysregulated. So we come together to provide services with all our member districts to reduce the cost. So that if we have one student in your district, and two students in different districts, we bring them together to reduce the cost of services and better serve our kids. One of the things we like to say at 917, you'll see it all over, is we belong to each other. We just kind of believe that. Whatever is happening in the world, whatever is happening on sites, we belong to each other. And we can disagree without it being disagreeable, but really staying connected in our belonging. Hey, there we go. Thank you. The first slide I want to share with you is I was up on the North Shore. It was during the pandemic, and it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. things. I mean, it just hit me. In the midst of COVID, schools have been that lighthouse for many of our children and families. So I just want to, first of all, thank the board, your work for what you've done for children, because we just believe they're all our children, no matter what district you're in, whether you're affiliated or not. But what you've done for children and families, it was tough times. So everyone from the bus drivers to the nurses to the paraprofessionals created the spaces because in a storm, they look to us to be that leaders in our communities. And in a storm, we'll be there. And when it's not a storm, we're that thing of beauty, that solitude, that schools, that communities rally around. So you'll see a lot of lighthouses when you kind of walk around India. When you kind of walk around 917, and our students paint lighthouses. I got some hanging in my office. And it just reminds me that hope is what we need to provide for people. Really can't read this, but I'm sure you have it in your packet or somewhere. But it's really our kind of our mission and vision. Just briefly, in partnership with member districts, Intermediate School District provides high-quality, equitable, specialized programming. That's kind of a summary. Then a vision. We model innovation, culture, and provide diverse pathways for students. Not everyone gets there in a traditional way. So with our ALC programming, our career and technical education programming, we're housed on Dakota County Technical College's campus for those programs. We have 2 sites, one way up north, kind of off Robert Street, West St. Paul area, and then we have a site we call Maine at Dakota Technical College. So career and technical education in partnership with Dakota County Technical College saves us money. And also our hope is to transition students right into programming right there at Dakota Technical College. We're working on articulation right now of some of our courses. We're going deeper so that our kids can earn high school credit and college credit. We're trying to grow our medical field. We want to stabilize that.
Yes, we do.
I want to teach a class. I want to stabilize that a bit. And our core values are kind of here. We live in our core values. We run our board meetings through the lens of our core values. So for example, when Kathy reports out, so David, they'll report out under core values, which are stewardship, innovation, and empathy. And every week, my report that goes to them is aligned to core values, what I'm doing in those values. Our weekly staff meetings with our team are all aligned to our core values. So living it. Hey, those are my kids.
Yay.
I got the best job in any district. I love my kids. They know me. And I just got to get some paraprofessionals so we can continue to grow programming for all of our students. We have 26 different sites. Some in Lakeville. I've been to one school in Lakeville already. A couple. I went to North. Is that the Panthers? North. Went to North and a couple other programs. We have programs within schools, within your schools. And we also provide something called itinerant services, which is for deaf and hard of hearing, interpreters, speech pathologists. So we try to meet students where they are in the community versus having them travel to different distances. Just quickly, all of our member districts. That's my board. We have a great board, great group of people who come together focused on each other, but also you should hear the dialogue that takes place in our meetings. When we talk about policy, I'll bring up a policy, and I'll ask what's happening in Lakeville with this, people from Burnsville. So it helps us co-create the best possible policy based on some of the things that's already been done, and we're not duplicating policy efforts. We're trying to work within frameworks and systems. Okay, I'll leave this with you. I don't know about you, but working with special education, there are acronyms for everything. There are so many acronyms, so I'll just leave this with you. Just a variety of different programs, what the acronyms are, what they mean. I was speaking a different language when I came into 917, just trying to get caught up with the acronyms. So there's so many different acronyms, but it just talks about the services we provide, and then the career and technical options, everything from computer technologies to construction trades, medical careers, graphic design, and fundamental chef, which is always nice. This is kind of a map of how we're spread out across the South Metro, the 26 different sites. Trying to invest into an electric car right now. Yes, it's killing me. Our partnership with Dakota Technical College, and it was established like in 1969. My understanding is we built, 917 kind of built the college area, and then Minsky took it over.
That's true. It actually was established 69, 70. It was actually established to be within the technical colleges, which were being built at that time. So 917 was actually a literal part of it. It wasn't that we had a joint memorandum of agreement or anything. And then it was, I want to say like 70, 71, no, 90, 91, when that changed. And they broke off the technical colleges so that they could have credits that could transfer to regular universities and colleges. And at that time, that is then where it was that all the special intermediate districts were then to be housed, if they could, in technical colleges in their area. And so that's now where we have a joint powers agreement with DCTC, but we're still housed and have cooperative services. Saves a lot of money for everyone doing this, so.
And it's nice to have students on college campuses learning, especially some of our alternative learners. They act very different over there than they do in their home districts. It's been interesting to watch. These are some of the partners that we work with closely. Everyone from TeamWorks, Metro State University, for teachers and trying to recruit and retain teachers. 916, Rev Academy, which I'll be talking more with Doug about kind of down the line. Just a great opportunity for kids, and I'll explain that at a different time. Maybe if you invite me back next year, I have something much more functional in that area. But these are some of the partners. Minnesota Humanities Center. We do a lot of story circle work where we're changing our culture and our climate through circle. And everyone has a story. That's what I love about music. I'm a big music guy. And, country music has some of the best stories. Even jazz has a story. You can hear it in the music even without the words. But everyone has a story. We want to honor everyone's story at 917. One of the things we always say is no one is invisible. No one's going to be invisible. So we want to make sure we're honoring the stories. We sit in circle, and it's amazing how it brings people together. We have roughly, this slide, if you have a chance to look at it, we have roughly 197 students in special education from ISD 194. And most of the kids are in the PACES program and Tesla. These are kids that are receiving services through special education. In our, which is interesting to me, in our ALC, we call it our DECALS program, we have, this year we have 5 students, all at Maine, that are going to our alternative learning school, alternative learning site. So you must be doing some good work here and keeping them in-house. That's good. That's good. CTE, Career and Technical Education. In the past, in 21, 22, we had 60. Right now, we have 54 of your students taking career and technical education on campus at DCTC. And I think they drive over. I don't think a bus is provided. We may have some legislation for that. So, one of the things that excites me, and I think some of the executives and assistant superintendent, you have access to this already. I think kind of froze here. But it's a data hub. And what it is, it tells us exactly where students are coming from in your district. And we, although I like being in business, I'm trying to slowly put ourselves out of business because we want to provide everything from professional development. I think we're the best at professional development for special education, for meeting the needs and helping teachers with special education, helping paraprofessionals. I really believe we're the best at that. But what we're trying to do is prevent students from coming to the 917, and also when they're ready to leave 917, making sure that they can transition back to the home districts or member districts. That's a couple of areas that we're really focusing on. The prevention piece, so we're giving you data on the students that are coming, what schools they're coming from, and what programs they're coming from. And if there's anything we can do to get into that school or work with the staff, if you ever need us, we can do that, and then transition them back. So we have a data hub. I think you've seen people seen it around. Okay, good. That's it. In a nutshell, we are purposeful, personalized partners. I'm trying to say that fast.
I think one of the things that I really appreciate, 917 and Dr. Faber has mentioned is that when it was even initially started, their focus was really delivering services in the individual schools. Not all the ISDs are like that. Some of them, you bring all the kids to one central building, whereas they really try to provide it. So we have programs all the way from Hastings to Bloomington to here, up to West St. Paul, South St. Paul, Inwood Grove Heights, Mendota Heights. But they try to keep the students that are in your school district in your school, wherever it is, if that's at all possible. We also service the juvenile center in Hastings, and we will many times in the past have taken students from other areas and other ISDs. They come and then they pay the tuition for that too. And I've been really proud of the fact of the work that they have done. It's been just incredible. And it's all down to servicing kids and doing the best they can. And the other thing is that I think that's important when you talk about educating, providing education for professionals and this kind of stuff. The intermediate districts have been really the ability to showcase and bring forward programs that are happening in other parts of the country or other districts, whether it's CSAs in Wisconsin or you're talking about some of the technical education down south. Some of the programs that we've been exposed to have come through educating all of us as board members and then the staff of all of our member districts. And I just think it's been very invaluable keeping that focus. So.
Really quick, we're also very intentional about our cost. We want to make sure that right now there are 2 districts that are higher than us in cost. So we found that we're a little top heavy with our administrators. So we cut administrators this year because we didn't have enough paraprofessionals to serve people appropriately. So we reduced our administrators instead of other staff so that, again, we can really be intentional about the cost. Questions?
So I just want to add a personal note. When we moved here from out of state, one of the things that we looked at as a family were the special education services from where my children were at a specific age all the way through age 21. We were attracted to Lakeville based on the TESA services that are provided at 917 because it provided a natural transition that young adults take at that age. So I do have a son that's in the program right now. He loves it. It's great. Kudos to your staff for the extra time and effort that they put in for time well beyond their contract hours by providing student activities like dances, just social activities like that. It's been a phenomenal program, and we are just so thrilled with all of the work that you do. So just from my mom heart and the personal, my son comes home, he talks about it, he loves the program. It's just a wonderful thing, so thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
I will have to say, my son receives hard of hearing and audiology 917 services too. And Emily Pfizer is awesome, because my son had to have cochlear implants last year. Now they're not working again, and she did a makeshift, and she's excellent and keeps good communication. So doing a great job. And we had a great TESA meeting last week to set them up for next year. So I was very impressed with the staff. So.
I can echo that too, because I had a bonus granddaughter that also went through the programs there and graduated from TESA. And it was great fun watching from above, standing behind the railing, watching prom.
Yes, yeah, they don't, yes.
Yeah, and some of the other activities, you don't want them to know you're there, but.
Right. Well, no, I was asked to leave after they did the march, and then I'm standing there, I'm like, this is so fun, and then he comes up to me, he's like, you can leave now. Okay.
So, yeah, they offer a tremendous amount to our children.
Right, but I mean, to staff that, it was the paras, the teachers were there, we talked to the teachers and everything, so that says a lot for your staff to put in those extra hours and give the kids something, not kids, young adults, something that was just really awesome. They were talking about how excited they were to have it again because they hadn't had it during COVID, so it was cool to see that event.
We'll pass it along.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Tough crowd.
Go Bison. Go Bison. My wife would be upset if I didn't say that. I have to live with the Bison sometimes.
Take care, y'all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, so next we have the annual report and budget presentation. Joe Berquist.
Hello, everyone. My second year making it to the meeting. As most of you know, some of you don't, we are a joint powers agreement between the city and the school district. I'm amazed how often people are like, what are you talking about? You're not just the city. So I try to give the school district credit too, and people are looking at me confused that I'm telling them we're a separate entity. So I'm here to give the annual report for the year and the budget presentation, and just kind of update you on some of the things that happened last year. I'll try not to embarrass myself today because last night at the council meeting I got nervous, typical. I'm not very good at public speaking, so I try it, I like to do it, but it doesn't work. So tonight, much more
You're
relaxed.
great at running arenas, though.
Yeah, okay.
You are great at that.
Thank you. So we are a public partnership. The city and the school district obviously split much of the cost as far as the debt service to build Hossie, and then the debt service in the last go around with the $8 million renovation that we just did to Ames Arena primarily, and now we are starting a new project with the Hossie outdoor rink. So we have 2 members from the school district here. That are on the board. We have 2 members from the city and then 1 member at large.
Is that a current picture of Nick Ames?
No.
I was gonna say, that is quite the hockey picture. Isn't it?
He didn't have that's what he came up with.
That's awesome. Okay.
So, I gotta remember I'm on 2 different screens here trying to keep up. The other thing we do, we're not just partners between each other, but we have other partners in Lakeville Youth Hockey and Heritage Figure Skating are the other 2 financial partners that we have. Lakeville Youth Hockey has recently committed up to $1.35 million towards the outdoor sheeted Hossie, and $700,000 earlier is a part of that from the parking lot renovations that we did. So they're very involved with us, and they contribute just like we do. So we try to operate without any We try to use our operating expense or revenue to pay for our expenses, which we've been successful at. I understand it has yet to dip into the school or the city's coffers to operate the facility outside of debt service, obviously, which the arenas can't afford. And Heritage Figure Skating also committed $100,000 towards the parking lot and $175,000 towards the outdoor rink that we're doing right now. Talking a little bit about 2022, my little hockey breakout there. This was a breakout year, I call it, for us here. Last year, I considered 21 kind of our back to normal year. We got back to where we were before COVID, but this year was really a breakout year for us to get coming. We had a very strong, we implemented some new welcome centers, which basically just means we combined our concessions, our office staff, our pro shop, all in one location, made them available whenever the arenas were open. Previously, concessions were only open for high school games. So we're trying to improve the amenities. We expanded our concession operations. We expanded our programming and activities. We expanded ice sales considerably and just overall facility use over this last 2 years really. Skate sharpening capabilities, advertising has been going very well. We've been selling that. We have an advertising program that we launched last year that we give 15% to the advertiser's choice, whether it be LHA, Heritage, any of the high school booster clubs, just as a give back, because we know we wouldn't be getting that advertising revenue without them partners. So that's just a picture of the new Welcome Center. Some of the things we've been spending, some of the extra revenue that we've been gaining, we're finally at this point where we're able to reinvest in the facility rather than just get by. And they were aging for many years, and our goal is to continue improving the items that are still broke, that were not updated with the last go around.
Look, Dave, they've got a little ice cream thing there.
Yeah, that got really popular last year.
Just saying.
One of our big revenue increases is obviously concessions has been huge. Our customers have been very grateful just to have the ability to, whenever they're there, to use it. Ultimately, I try to use our concessions, all our public facing stuff to pay our additional staff. So I like all my part-time staff. If I can raise enough that way to pay for additional staff so we can service our customer, that's our ultimate goal. And we're meeting that this last year. We did make enough in them areas to cover all of our part-time staff. But we increased our revenue by $53,000. In 1 year alone, we exceeded revenue. Our Learn to Skate program is 4th largest in Minnesota. It's one of the top in the Midwest area. We expanded our stick and puck offerings, we call it, which is just any dead ice that we have sitting there, we make it available to people. So rather than just, no, you can't, if you're not gonna buy it, you can't use it. So we believe strongly, I believe strongly in letting the community use it. So we offer memberships, we offer walk-ons, and that's been very popular. Part of our Ice Club membership now, we offer a $30 a month fee. You can come to all the stick and pucks, open skate, everything you want if it's a public activity. And that's been extremely popular and helping grow the revenue. I keep going backwards, sorry. Total ice hours rented, or programming event, I'm sorry. Programming events I mentioned, the largest. Total ice hours. We've had 2 big years, we've jumped. This year this last 22, we had 5,049 hours rented to customers, compared to 4,600 in 2022 or 2021. And our record up until that point was 4,100, but set back in 2019 right behind COVID. So we've almost increased our sales by 1,000, which has been very beneficial. Like I said, that's helping us make all these improvements and add full-time staff and do all the things to make us an elite facility. How we did it, we improved scheduling. There's lots of holes in the schedules. We maximize our hours up through 10 p.m. reduce resurface times from 15 to 10 minutes. It's amazing how much 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 20 minutes there adds up over the course of a year. And that was a big part of it. We increased our customer base in the off-season. Previously in the off-season, I think it wasn't open as often, but we've really done a good job of attracting people in the off-season and creating opportunities there to, you know, everybody think 5 months of the year I have more ice than I can handle, but then the other 7 months, a lot of arenas sit empty if you don't go get the customers. We added before school ice rentals as well as open stick and puck, so that's been popular. We have kids getting dropped off every morning now just to go skate. They don't have to go to some expensive private tutoring or class. They can, you know, it's made it very affordable. Mouse is not working very well here. Did I freeze? There we go. I think I'm going. Facility rental money obviously ties right to them hours. Sometimes you'll see a facility, their hours are up, or, you know, it should be equal. Total facility rentals, we were at an all-time high in 22 at 1.1 million, up 168,000 over the previous year. Other rentals, which are all our camps and just outside of our big customers, LHA, the school district, and we were up 75%. We increased from 228,000 to 402,000.
I think you skipped a slide.
Pardon?
Number 8.
He covered it
Did
when
he
it was
cover it?
frozen on
Okay.
the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Public use hours, I was talking a little bit about how we've expanded public use. You can see public open hockey, 426 hours last year were available to the public. Stick and puck was almost 340. Adult open hockey, we do some of that. The dead ice that I spoke about, 225 hours. Learn to skate lessons have 175. Public open skating has 172. Open high school hockey, we do pickup ice sales, which we do at reduced rate, last minutes, more affordable for people rather than the higher rates. And a couple other, we host birthday parties.
So Joe, all those public times, are those all open if you have that membership, or if it's a public event?
Yes, if you.
So there's a lot of opportunity for
There's a
people
lot of
just to go.
opportunity. In the winter, it's a little tighter, but that's why we do before school and other things. But like the other 7 months of the year, there's all kinds of opportunity, and especially if you have a family, we have a family pass or an individual pass. You can go to anything, so it's very flexible. Like the summer now, we'll start selling a lot of these for the summer, because we do have a lot of holes in the ice between camps, and I just turn that all into stick and puck and whatever people are asking for, and it's part of their membership. Our combined hours, if you take into account youth hockey as everyone, right now Lakeville is our largest customer at 28%. As I said, the other ice sales are starting to close, which is what we want because that will help keep our costs down over the long haul if we can maximize the off-season. That's at 27%. The school district takes up 12%, the high school teams, and then there's a whole host of all the public stuff that fits in there. So that's kind of our breakdown on hours that we sell. So our year-end financial summary, I kind of already touched on most of this. I don't want to bore you with the numbers, although I like the numbers myself.
So does Bill.
I'm sorry, that's my scorecard. There you go. But overall, ice rentals were up considerably. 22 was an all-time record. Events and programs were 85,000, 42,000 to 85,000. Concession revenues, we just continue to blow that out of the water as we continue. We've been renovating and adding more things. We're doing some more renovations this year over at Hossie, so that's going well. Advertising revenue up about 40,000 right now a year. 33,000 over 21, which because of a COVID year, 16,000 over the record before that. Total revenues were 1.4 million, which was another all-time high. And we beat our budget by 183 over as far as revenue goes. Did I get that the right direction this time? As I go back and forth. Salary, we were obviously up because this was the first year we actually started getting staff, so we were a little better staffed. But it's still a challenge as we enter this fall. Now we'll go into our new staffing model with full-time employees that I keep putting off because I'm afraid to blow my budget up. But now that we'll be open year-round with Hossie coming up, that'll happen. And I'll try to go through it. Unless you want, if you see something you want to ask about, just say something, but I'm not going to go through. I know you have a lot of work tonight, so. 2023, we're at that time of year where we do an estimated budget for this year. We have some big plans, operations goals. Obviously, the pavilion rink at Hossie is underway. They've already started construction. That was not part of the original budget. Along with that, we're going to do a whole bunch of renovations inside. Us staff are going to do them. We're going to paint and brand it in the Cougar colors, just like we did Ames Arena. We painted it in the North colors, and we just ordered a brand new set of dasher boards for the inside rink. We are installing a camera system, and this is all stuff we're doing on our own, because I think it's important for the facilities to be a home to the community, and we don't always have the money to pay what it costs to paint an entire facility, so we all get dirty. We're implementing a new welcome center there. We're expanding welcome center revenues, and we're planning for new revenue streams next year with the new outdoor rink and so forth, and we're getting into the tournament business and other things. So our estimated budget for this year is actually going to change because of the construction of Hossie. Was not planned when we did the original budget. Our summer tournaments have been canceled because of that. We were going to enter the tournament business this year, but we will not be doing that. And we also are going to incur a debt service payment of at least $63,400 that we're going to pay towards the energy improvement debts we did at Ames and a little bit of Hossie. So half of that will go to the school district, half of that will go to the city to buy down your debt service. And that'll be our contribution towards it. And then obviously we have to redo the budget to accommodate that debt and some other things. So what does it mean? We have to do an amended budget this year, and which we will be doing tomorrow at our board meeting. Okay, move along. So I'm gonna jump. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the amended budget. It's gonna balance out. I'll jump right to the bottom of it. I mean, ultimately, what it really is, we're just changing a bunch of categories. Our net revenue is going to drop a little bit simply because of the new debt service, but overall we will break even and probably exceed budget once again, just because we're very conservative when I do budget. I don't like to plan on the unknown, but because we beat budget so much last year, we're actually going to make our original budget just off of what we were doing. So even though we're cutting a big amount of money in a couple categories, we're still making it up. So new and improved in 24, as I call it. So the new outdoor pavilion rink opens. After that, Hossie, we will have a new ice plant, which means Hossie will be open year round, which will help drive our revenue. Obviously, our biggest sale is ice sales, and the more of that we can do, that's 80% of our business. And then our welcome centers, we will continue expanding them. We're going to get into the summer tournament business, and then we plan to utilize the pavilion rink year round. So we'll be offering, I haven't decided yet, in the spring whether we'll put turf in there. We've talked about pickleball, we talked different things. So we may put turf in there because it is covered, and we have had some people ask, for some additional turf to the dome, but we haven't made any decisions on that yet. And then we're looking at other things we can do in the summer, whether it be festivals. We've talked to the city that if they wanted in for Pan of Prague or any of them sort of things to host anything there, to let us know. We're looking at some possible, I actually have a contact with a Hispanic promotions company that does these little rodeos and festivals that we may bring in. And they also do bring some big acts out of Mexico which are very popular down there. So we might do some outdoor concerts and that sort of thing there. But so if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see used out there, let us know. Overall, the proposed budget, I think you've all received a copy of it, so I'm not going to get too much detail, but we're looking at revenue in 24 just in ice rentals alone are going to be at 1.4 million, which is pretty much what our entire budget was this past year. Programming events are expected to rise again, but we're being conservative once again because so much of this new stuff is unknown. So rather than overshoot, I usually always undershoot, and then I'm happily surprised, and I'll use that money to better the facility or buy down costs and so forth. Total revenue combined, we're estimating right now to be at 1.7 million in 2024, and that doesn't take into account we didn't plan any tournament revenue in there yet. We didn't plan any outdoor summer activities in there, so none of that has been budgeted because we don't know what it's going to be. So we do know we probably will exceed this. Get the biggest salary will be the biggest increase right now. We are implementing the full-time staff finally. We'll have an operations manager, myself, and then we'll have 2 supervisors and then 2 full-time drivers. And what that does is gives us year-round staff with very little need for part-time drivers and so forth. We'll still have them, but we won't be relying on constantly retraining people, and it just makes for much better customer service and so forth. So we'll be doing that. We're budgeted 20%, 27% of revenue. That number will jump up a little bit, depending on how we do on our revenue. Commodities, that there is really where we do a lot of our internal. We've switched over to doing a lot of our own repairs and maintenance, so commodities would be up, but and when we do improvements, it usually falls in that category. So we have 125,000 budgeted there. Administrative overhead, contracted expenses, that's usually our highest. That's all our ice repairs, our ice plants. We got hit really hard with the Hossie ice plant. It literally died 1 week before my season ended. So it couldn't have timed it any better. Except Figure Skating Club had to move their show. They were not too happy, but they understood, and we kept it going. Utilities is one of our biggest problems, obviously, as I'm sure is yours right now. I mean, the gas prices, and it's extremely expensive to keep ice. It takes a lot of electricity, but this year we've seen it tick down, and we're hoping that continues, and hopefully the gas prices will come down as the world adjusts to the Ukraine war and fixes it, but we'll see. But we're budgeted, we think comfortably that we'll be able to absorb it moving forward next year. Our interest and debt service, we will have the new, we were paying the interest on the parking lot already, and now we'll have the contribution towards the debt service on the expansion project. Capital expenses, we transfer about $140,000. Well, we do transfer $140,000 a year into that for major. We will do that again next year. That will remain the same. Net profit for 24 is expected to be right above that break even, but again, we expect it to be higher simply because we haven't accounted for some revenue that we know we're going to have. I jumped ahead on you, didn't I? I don't know. Oh, I was there. No. Why can't I get this right? I'm sorry, I'm playing too.
His screen is right. I'm reading his screen. His screen. You will know my readers.
All right. Capital reserve budget is the last thing. We are purchasing the new set of boards this year because it was gonna cost us $60,000 to repair the ones we had, which did not make sense. So we flopped our Zamboni, which was a 1.5 years out ordering for the new rink. So that's been pushed out to 25. So we'll have a little dip in our reserve fund, but we should be fine. Let's dip before. So with that, I apologize for the lengthy rambling on money, but I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns. We will be voting on this tomorrow at the board meeting, to finalize our budgets and amended budgets and so forth.
Yep.
You're really in good shape.
Yeah, it's looking,
You
they
really
look
are.
really good.
We've had other reports past years. This one is really positive.
I got a long ways to go.
But they're looking really good. They're looking nice.
Well, and you didn't say anything about the mites program, but as a parent of a mite, I was blown away by how many kids are in that program. And my kids are very thankful for your concessions that are there all the time.
I'm sure
My
you're
bank
not.
account is not.
Yes, we're on the, I agree with you,
Yes,
same thing here.
yes.
It's a constant visit, for sure.
Yeah.
Now I'll just think about it as a contribution.
Yes.
So after the board meeting tomorrow, if it gets approved, then it comes to you. That's why the presentation is taking place, so you'd have an idea of what was going on, if you had any particular questions. Because I don't know how many years the agreement's been between the school district and.
Long time.
Quite a while.
Yep. And the LHA was a initial investor and driver getting this up and going, the partnership going, so they really contributed a lot.
All right, well, thank you,
That's
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
And we do have a groundbreaking at 2:30.
At 2:30, I'll see you there.
At the new,
Yeah,
At the
at the
hospital
pavilion.
facility, yeah.
All right, next up is the expiring operating levy review and renewal, plus the referendum election discussion. That's Bill and,
Yeah, Steph and I will go through it.
okay.
We'll wait for it to pop up. If we can find the mouse where it is.
Yeah, it's over there.
I'll bring it over. I actually have a check here. Could I leave it for you?
Yeah, I'll
For
take
some
it.
reason.
Oh, you spoke up quick on that.
Whoa,
Before I go to the school.
your monthly payola.
Thanks, Joe.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. Okay, tonight we want to go over, we have a lot of new board members who are ready to go over operating levies, how we use them, how do they come to be, how do we bring them to the public and so forth. I do have Shelby McQuay is here from Ellers for any questions. So we'll move on. Okay, due to unstable, state and federal funding, Minnesota school districts rely on operating levies. I shouldn't even say most, because I know we have a lot of rural school districts that don't have it. They've been having difficulty trying to pass an operating levy, and we'll talk about that, what their options are here in a second. But there really are funds to support the day-to-day operations for our district, staffing and/or supplies. The amount of levies determined by the school district is typically based upon the budget needs and a residential tax tolerance. And as we'll talk about the survey, the public survey here in a minute, we talked about tax tolerance and what people might be willing to pay as in a tax to actually put a new levy in place. Of course, that funding is per student, but per pupil unit. As we've talked in the past, as you know, K through sixth graders we just get a 1 pupil unit for those particular students. But once we go to a secondary, 7th grade through 12th grade, and we get a 1.2. So when we look at what we generate for funds, it's not just the enrollment, it's that bigger pupil unit number, which is, not a huge difference, but it is more. Of course, we can only ask voters for a new operating levy or renewal in November. We can't do it in the spring like we can do for like a bond referendum. And then typically, I mean, the board would decide, but typically an operating levy goes for 10 years. And then there's an option for inflation factor, and here at Lakeville, we do have inflation factors built in on our operating levies.
And 10 years is because that's the maximum.
Yeah, 10 is the max, we can always do less. Like I said, it's a decision for the board, but yeah, 10 is the maximum that we can do. Okay, a local school board must formally call for an election in order to hold a referendum election. Okay, for tonight, I'm going to just briefly touch on some Minnesota state funding and how it relates to these operating levies. And of course, we're going to talk about our current levies, the one that we have talked several times about a renewal coming up that we need to take care of, and then talk about a new operating levy and what that might be used for, and then of course next step coming up in the next couple months. Now I put this in on here again, as we've showed this slide several times, showing how the state of Minnesota has fallen behind inflation. So if you look at the blue line, this is inflation figured in our funding. So if the state of Minnesota would have given us just the inflation rate on a yearly basis, we'd be on that blue line. But you can see we're actually on the red line, so quite a bit less. And right now the difference is $1,263, or if they would have followed inflation, we'd have another $16.5 million in revenue, which of course we don't. So there's two factors when we talk about our operating levies. So this is our projection on our enrollment. So of course there's two pieces. We have an inflation factor, which we just talked about, figured into our operating levies, but it's also on the pupil units. So you can see we're growing. So our operating levies right now, as we get increased enrollment, automatically grow at that same percentage rate. Now here I just want to show really how much this actually is part of our budget. A lot of the public believe that the money that they pay in property tax fund the schools, which is true to a certain degree. But you can see here in the general fund that property taxes in our general fund are only 24% of our revenue. The rest, 69% comes from the state of Minnesota, and then we have some other small pieces, federal, and of course some local funds. You can see that it's about a quarter was actually property taxes. And we break that down one more time, you see that inside of those property taxes, there's capital, there's equity, there's local optional revenue, and so forth. And the operating levy is only 45% of the 24%. So about 10%. So our operating levies are about 10% of our budget when we look at the total volume. Now here's a list of all of our operating levies along with other things we've done over the last few years. For an example, if you look in 2015, there's a capital projects referendum. That is a levy that we have on for 10 years also, but that is funding all of our technology devices as we go forward. It's also our the STEM equipment that we're putting into place. And then of course we had two bond referendums. You remember in 19, we had $42.9 million that funded the new pool, it funded all the security pieces that we put in. We put a new gym, McGuire, and so forth. And then 2021, that bond referendum is for the brand new elementary school, which is under construction at this time. So to focus then on the operating levies, you can see that in 2013, this particular operating levy was originally voted to the public at $540. When we talk about the renewal now, you'll see that the levy that's expiring is $245.92. Now, what the state's done over the last few years, they've realized that they are underfunding school districts, and they have started something called a local optional revenue. So school districts who have not been able to pass a levy can levy up to $724 per pupil unit without having an election. In our situation, when we already had an operating levy, those operating levies are pulled into that 724. So they're permanently now moved over to local optional revenue, and we don't have to renew that portion. The levy before this, the 2010 levy, went 100% into LOR, and that's why you didn't see us do any type of renewal on that levy in the last couple of years. Okay, so you can see the money that's generated by these operating levies. So like we've talked about, the one that we need to renew that's expiring is $3.2 million. So if we don't get that renewed, we're back having to take $3.2 million out of our budget because that revenue would go away. So then we have every other year, we've done an operating levy, so you can see what they're generating. And you can see the inflation, how it's affected us. You can see that in 2015, we had a $100 operating levy. You see now that it's actually $110 per pupil unit that it's generating. And you can see how the 693 is going to 899 and so forth. Just to get an idea how do they work. Here's a comparison of where our operating levies compared to others like-sized districts. These are really like-sized. So I'm sorry it's a little small. Too small, I can't quite see it either. There's no way for me to zoom in on it. But anyway, I know I do. What I've done is the 7 school districts that are on this list above ours, I've taken an average of those and then subtracted ours, of course. So you can see that from some of the districts have up to, even over $400 per pupil unit more than we have. So if we would have up to the max, like some of these other districts have, we'd actually generate another $5.4 million in revenue for the school district. So there is room to put more on. Okay. If the November 7th election were today, if you remember from the survey from this past February, 86% of residents would support an operating levy renewal. And again, this operating levy renewal generates $3.2 million for our general fund. These are essential funds at this point in time, as we've used these now for 10 years for our budget. Again, this operating levy renewal would not increase tax on Lakeville area residents, except for a small piece. Remember, there's an inflation factor. So the inflation factor piece that increases it a little bit, that would be an increase in tax. But the regular, just the operating levy, no. All this is already in tax rolls, and it would remain the same.
With Lakeville growing, it still could decrease, correct?
Yeah, so there's two pieces that would affect the growth. Number one, like I said, is the inflation factor. Number two is the growth of students. So as we have more students, of course, it's multiplied by the number of pupil units. So the two pieces that would make it grow a little bit.
Yeah, but I think what Terry was talking about.
But I was saying with more
is
homes,
as-
they're gonna be paying taxes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, in a school district, yes, we generate, here's the total dollar amount, but as we see more and more, not only housing, but commercial properties come on the tax rolls, it dilutes that number. So a lot of times, we don't see an increase, we actually maybe even see a decrease in that operating levy for everybody that's paying tax already.
Because of the growth.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, now we actually have new news here the last day or so. New state legislation will give local school boards the authority to renew an expiring operating levy one time instead of holding a special election. So it looks like, we haven't voted yet, but it looks like what's in the conference committee at this point is it will allow the school board to renew this levy without going through an election. Only one time. So 10 years from now, it's a different story. And who knows what the legislation will look like by then. Right?
So,
Yeah.
just a question, would that be a one-time for each of our levies?
Yes, I did verify that this morning. Yes, so for the 4 operating levies that we have in place, we have the option to renew them by board vote.
Okay.
Without
And that's
having.
if that becomes effective before we need to have this one renewed,
So
or,
we-
calling it to vote.
Correct.
So I think that they want to finish it by Friday because the deadline is next
Monday.
week.
This
Yeah.
week, next Monday.
22nd is, and what they're told us they're shooting for the 18th.
Right,
Yeah.
yep, that's what I heard too.
Yep.
So that'll be something that you'll have to think about, because there's pluses and minuses to doing that, if it's just by board vote instead. And that's why some of that survey data is important. When you ask the community, what do you feel about certain things, you get some feedback and thoughts on how the community's feeling at that particular time.
Well, I don't want to make any more cuts, so that's pretty easy.
Okay, I'm gonna move on now to possibility of a new operating levy. We've talked about this a little bit. Again, the survey, if we had the election today from the survey information that we received back in February, that the majority of residents, 61% would increase an operating levy increase up to approximately $80 per year in tax, or their tax tolerance, or $6.67 on a monthly basis. Now, what would we use that new operating levy for? Of course, the big thing that's coming is a staffing for the Highview Elementary School opening up in the fall of 2024. In order to have funds available for fall of 2024, it's something that has to be done this year, so it's ready for the next fiscal year. Secondarily, looking to attract quality staff and or additional student resources. So again, as you know, right now, our pupil units are at 13,000. So you see that $100 would generate that $1.3 million we need to staff that building. And then we have some other options, just for your consideration. If we moved to $150 and looked at really being able to attract staff or add some additional student resources, look at a $150 or a $200 operating levy. Now, how that stacks up with tax, $450 is approximately the average home value when it comes to Lakeville residents in our district. So you can see that at the 100 mark, we're at $50. At the 150, we're at 75. And both of these numbers are below the survey amount that we saw back in February. Of course,
Well, and the survey amount was.
$80.
Yeah, but it was a question that was asked was very little education, behind what we would do if we were doing a full levy campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Right.
levy campaign would come with a lot more, which we see people willing to invest if they know more.
So then there was one more point, just to look at it at a monthly basis. You see a lot of people are paying their taxes through escrow for their houses, so they are paying a monthly fee. So you can see here that at $100 it's $4.17 a month, and at $150 we're at $6.25 a month. Okay.
So can I ask a question about that, though? So you're showing us some database kind of with the question from the survey outlining it. But when you're looking and forecasting what we need, what are you seeing our need is?
Well, I think the discussions we've had, number one, we have a need for $1.3 million to make sure that we can put enough staff into that building without trying to find more general fund dollars that we have now in order to fill that building with staff. And what that is, it's the principal, it's all the office staff, it's the custodians, it's all the utilities that go into that building. When we look at teaching staff, well, the teaching staff will come with the students, because the students generate the funds for the teachers. So it's those other indirect costs is what we're looking to fund. So that's at that 1.3.
Yeah, but
She was asking for
what
the
are you
other-
needing beyond that
Yeah,
to
you had
keep us
three-
balanced and not needing to cut?
Well, again, the cuts we went through this past several months balance our budget. So I don't need more operating levy money to balance the budget.
Well, we don't need to, but we need to grow our fund balance.
It depends on a couple of things. Number one, it depends on negotiations and what we get from the state. So right now, they're talking 4% and 2% for the biennium of that, which and then you have your special education subsidy. So it generates money for us of about, if they stay with those numbers, before the other unknowns that could take money away, is about $10 million. So you have to take a look at that amount for the next year, and then the following year, it's an additional $2 million. So you go from 10 million increase to a 2 million increase, which creates some issues for us.
Have they explained why they're doing that?
Can I explain why they're doing
No,
that?
have they explained why they're doing that?
No.
No, they're not.
It's because they're, how do I want, well, it's kind of as I
know
said
you can't
before,
answer that.
they've got a fund balance, and if they put it into recurring expenditures, which they are planning to do, that very quickly dwindles it. And so that's part of what they're taking a look at on how can they maybe sustain some of that reoccurring expense over a period of time, which is why they stair-stepped it down. In my opinion, that's my guess of why they're doing that. And so the other issues that you run into are the unemployment, which they're gonna give a little bit of money toward for the first year, but then after that, it becomes an expense for us. No.
Yep.
Yes, and then the family leave, that creates another issue for us of a payment that we have to have. I think Bill showed that last time, is about $700,000.
We actually-
350 to us and 350 to the employees. So that 10 million very quickly dwindles down from 10 million to probably, if I were to ballpark it, you're looking at maybe $5 million if those other things come through. And then the following year, you basically are at nothing, because just the cost of doing business goes up that amount.
My question is around, we don't want to go out and ask for levy dollars, get it approved, and turn around in a year and have to make cuts.
Right.
So I want to make sure that what we're looking at, I get what the survey says, but I know we're doing other rounds of surveys. And do we need to educate and guide our community to what our true needs are, so we're not cutting?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like I said, we have made the cuts to balance the budget, but we have some new expenditures coming with this legislation that are very large. Yes, we have approximately $10 million in new money, it looks like, for next year, but just the unemployment cost for our hourly employees in the summertime is over $3.5 million, okay? And the family leave for us is $350,000, so about $4 million of that disappears. So now we're back to, yes, there's an increase, and it's an increase more than we're used to. I mean, I've never seen an increase of 4% ever. All the times that I've worked in schools, and that's starting to get to be kind of a long time. So the gray hair.
Not as long as
Tell me
Terry.
about
Not
it.
as long as Terry. I don't want your family calling.
And that's part of the reason, I think, for the discussion with you tonight is, if the component passes that says you can do a levy, that basically stabilizes where we are. It doesn't force reductions in the next year. So in my opinion, depending on how negotiations go and depending on what other things pop up from the state. The issue is we have to be mindful of the tax tolerance of the community, because the last thing you want to do is go out into the community and say, hey, we want another X amount of dollars, and get told no, because then that starts a cycle that's hard to break. If you already, that's why surveying folks is important as well, to get an idea of what they're tolerant of in regards to that. So when you saw those other two items that were put on there, one of those things about attracting and retaining staff, most communities feel pretty strongly about attracting and retaining staff. For us, one of those things is maybe that gives us the ability to get rid of the cap that we put on the salary schedule, so we could attract veteran teachers that want to come to us and not bring them in at 5 years of experience if they've got 10 years of experience. That was about $500,000 in what we did in the reduction.
Which one of those is that?
That's the, once you go into that
Go back.
second column,
The second column
Go back.
generates,
150?
the second column generates another $500,000. So that would take care of, say, attracting that staff, and we don't have to say no. We're only gonna give you this much experience. It just opens it up for a lot more.
So what does
options.
the third column?
the third column is, then it's another, well,
Another
$1.3
five.
million. So you go up from $100 per pupil to $200 per pupil, and that's that next chart that kind of breaks it down what the monthly cost is. Then what we're talking about with additional student services, we visited with our administrators about what other supports Do we need to maybe expand upon the social emotional things, the structures at the high school with deans and counselors, social workers? But I'm gonna tell you, to fully fund everything that we would probably want, it's beyond that additional $1 million. So it would probably be bringing some of the hours back into the elementary to support the tutoring and the things that we made reductions in, and then start the process of moving forward with the social emotional help and support that's needed at the secondary level. And behavioral support was another thing that was mentioned by our administrative team as we visited with them, as things that seem to be pretty strong. So we would spell those things out, because you just can't say additional student support. We'd have to be pretty specific on what we think that is, but that's why we got the numbers, or the ideas from them today. We'll kind of be crunching numbers, but you know as well as I do, $1 million goes like that when you're talking in staff. It goes fairly quickly.
Now, my question is, this is still in development. We're going to see the results of what you're going to what's going to happen with each one of those levels. The first level is just staffing.
First level is just staff in the elementary building.
And then you'll explain in more detail what the next two levels are. My question is, when do we have to make a decision on this?
Thank you for that.
We're getting ready to show you that.
That's
Okay.
Just a clarifying question, just because I know one thing we've talked about with staff, just in terms of recruitment efforts, is trying to hire more diverse staff. And so if we hire for Highview, those teachers have to stay, or can we move anybody from other schools to try to diversify?
Well, there's probably some contractual language in there, but my opinion is you normally try to have uniformity across the district. You don't take your most veteran teachers out of every building and put them in to the new elementary just because they want to be there. You have to go through the contractual language, but you try to balance out the diversity of your schools so that you have veteran, mid-veteran, brand new folks in each one of your buildings as best you can, so that you have the training and mentoring taking place as well.
I'm just wondering what we could potentially do with that money, if just for recruitment efforts, when we were talking about that at our previous meeting.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we take a look at. Our initial thought was, since Lakeville seems to be a place that a lot of people want to come to, by putting that cap on, we know it's probably going to hinder some maybe mid-veteran teachers that would come that maybe have 6, 7, 8, 10 years of experience, because we're only going to bring them in at 5 next year, so that may limit us in some of those areas as well. But that doesn't mean you can't recruit other people. The challenge is there's not a bunch of educators in the pipeline. You know, education at universities is a depleting major in every university and college I've talked to.
I think the state's got some plans for throwing some money into diversifying
They've
staff.
they've talked about it, and I think that's
There's something going on.
but I haven't seen the number on that.
Yeah, I haven't
Well,
either.
that's what I'm I'm just wondering.
And that's what, if those were the
Making
dollars,
some
and of course that's what we'd use those for as well.
Yeah, okay.
So when we get these, like, will we be provided several different types of options on what that second level and third level could look like? Because in my mind, I'm thinking there are things that we cut that I would like to bring back.
Well,
Yeah, you're one person though.
No, I'm just saying,
Oh,
that's just asking for
we get
options.
together,
I
yeah.
would say I would not tell you that we would necessarily say we're bringing back something that was reduced. I think we'd have to have a conversation about, so if we're talking about attracting, retaining staff, what does that look like administratively? And we just shared that example. It could be something different, but part of it's got to be contractually followed
Right.
and also statutorily followed. You just can't say, hey, I'm going to give somebody a $10,000 bonus to sign up.
Right.
To be a part of our district, so there's things that we'd have to do. And then I think we all know that the student support services in regard to social emotional side of things is something that's needed. Even when you talk to our staff, you talk to our administrators, we just have more kids that have issues that not everybody was trained to deal with, so you need to bring in those supports to try to help them. So those would be the bigger ticket items that we administratively feel like the things that we would be talking about, what could lay out more of what those plans particularly look like for you.
Yeah, I would definitely like
Yes.
specifics
This is
on,
just
like,
an initial.
some of those, like
Yeah,
just
this is
options
initial
and
brush. Yeah.
thinking about like the social emotional learning, like we did have a levy that was tied to social emotional learning. So just making sure that we spell out how this would be different or adding on to what we already have.
Yep.
Yeah, and you have to remember, we'd lay out the plans, but the language that goes on the ballot's gonna be very generic. It's not gonna be, hey, you're gonna do these 10 things. Ballot language is never spelt out like that. So next steps, somebody asked about that.
Yes, I asked.
Great. So the next part of this process is to gain some final planning feedback from our residents through round 2 of a Morris Leatherman community survey. We have been working that with Peter this week. We anticipate launching that early next week. And once that is completed, Peter Leatherman will come back here on June 20th at that work session along with the administration to bring forward some final recommendations for a November 7th election. The benefit of that is state legislation will be known at that time. We'll have more information on the school board renewal option and a better understanding of our funding situation too. I'm here to just share with you that communications and community engagement is an essential part of any referendum campaign and any really referendum election that is successful. It's, like Doug said, it's our role and responsibility to make sure we're matching our needs as a district with what our community values. And that's really the benefit of doing a strategic survey and really doing a data analysis along with that. So that's the benefit of having someone like Peter Leatherman hired to help us effectively evaluate what we need to do next. Since several members here are new, I also want to just express the importance of having a timeline to run an effective communications info campaign around a referendum. It truly takes a communications staff team to put together just the information and strategy and all of the communication tactics about 2 to 3 months to have a solid informational campaign. And that's really important so that when our residents, our parents go to vote, they feel like they, first of all, know that there's an election happening. They know that what issues we're facing as a district, and they feel like they've been communicated with. And so that 2 to 3 month timeline allows us to put everything together from required statutory election items that must be printed and sent to all residents, to videos, to our social media campaign, to getting our superintendent out there and doing informational sessions with key community leaders and groups and our staff teams and holding parent sessions. And that process really kicks off at our all-staff welcome back event when we have done campaigns in the past. And that would be my recommendation to you along with this coming year. So in the age of information, we are competing for our residents' time, our parents' time. They are all very busy people, and so a strategic campaign is really important. So I think with that,
I think we're just getting in under the wire too with the May survey. Because you get beyond that, you've lost them because of summer.
yes.
So they'll be able to get the survey in before
And that was
we have
partly
parents
due
check
to
out.
Peter's recommendation
Yep.
too, to try to find out what was gonna happen with the
Yep.
legislative session. You know, if they would come out and said, hey, we're giving 5 and 5 or 7 and 5, and then they go around tooting the horn about how much money they've given, that throws a blanket on how taxpayers feel about what's going on. People are gonna still pretty strongly about 4 and 2. You know, the challenge is, we just have to make sure, to Steph's point, we're able to show where that 4% and that 2% go and what that means to our district and how that impacts as we're talking about building a fund balance back, taking care of our staff.
And the other cost of funding that might get thrown our way. Or
And those types of
costs
things, you know, we still don't
expenditures.
have that completely clear yet, but we have a better idea of where we're gonna be at. Normally, you know, summer is not a good time to run any campaign, but that's when your planning takes place, and then your campaigning normally kicks off in the fall once everybody comes back to school.
So it says that it's launching in May, it is May, so is that gonna happen soon?
Yeah, the survey will launch next week.
Okay.
So it will be a smaller sample of the voter file. So it's more of a follow-up to the February survey.
Okay.
We are just making some final tweaks to it, and it'll be out there so Peter can come back here on the 20th, share the data with everybody, and we can make our recommendations to you and really look at those different tax tolerance options and what we're recommending.
And how long is the survey running? I'm sorry.
Usually it goes 3 weeks. It depends on the sample size. My guess is it'll be a little bit shorter, but we will be notifying residents that they may happen to get a phone call from the Morris Leatherman group.
So really what we're doing with the survey is asking those kind of tax tolerance questions that we just showed you, hey, here's what it would be for just opening an elementary school, here's what it would be for a cost of doing the elementary school and or this, here's what it would be. Those 3 areas is kind of where we stayed within the tax tolerance, but I guess one of the questions that we need to ask you is, do you want us to ask something? Did we do one above and beyond that amount, or did we stay at the kind of tipping
No,
point that
we
we
stayed
did?
with this,
But from a couple comments I heard, you want us to have Peter ask a question of something. The challenge is to spell out what going to the max is we're gonna be able to fund. You know, that's gonna take a little more time in campaigning to explain. I don't think the community is ready to go to the max based off of the last survey that we saw. That was pretty much the flip of like 61%
Yeah.
against doing something above and beyond that. So that's why we kind of went with where the last survey put some boundaries, but we can ask, we haven't finalized the survey yet, if you want us to go another step beyond, maybe go back on the slide.
And my question isn't about going to the max or anything, it's just making sure we're asking
Right.
enough.
So, but, and that's the tipping point that you have to be mindful of. If you ask enough, but you don't ask too much, people say no. So that's what we were trying to show based off of the last survey. What per month was that value that people felt comfortable in that $8 range? It was actually about 7, so we went a little step above. With 8, we can go another step or 2 if that's something you have an interest in. I can't tell you that we couldn't use the money. The issue is we also don't want to set ourselves up to have people say you're just asking for.
Here's the
more
question
than
I
you
have
need.
is, do we ask the 3 ranges, but take off the lower range since our community said the second range works? So do we do the second and the third range and then do that as range 1, 2, and then do a
Sure.
third range? So,
I would say the only reason that Peter probably didn't tell us to do that is because from when we surveyed before to when we'd be surveying now, things have changed in the economy. They've continued to kind of be fairly tight. Now, we did have a neighbor next door just pass their bond referendum, the biggest one in the state, so maybe
Yeah.
there is some tax tolerance that, you know, is if people are
but that's a
feeling
separate, that's
comfortable
a
in.
separate question from this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a bond referendum compared
Yeah.
to a levy, but it still is a taxpayer
Yeah, yeah,
issue.
yeah.
People, I don't know that the public necessarily
They-
sees the difference.
They
Well,
don't,
they-
they don't know the difference.
They don't, but they have to be communicated
Yeah,
differently.
it's all still
and-
about communication, and that's why we kind of are presenting it to you tonight to say, these are the ranges that we took from the last survey and what Peter would say would be good sample size to be able to test. If you want us to go to another level or 2, we can do that as well. I don't think it makes any difference in the survey, it just takes another 30 seconds to ask the question.
I don't know, I'm a little hesitant. People are gonna see the state is giving the district more money.
Yep.
And unless the new survey shows a higher tolerance, I
Well-
wouldn't change what we got.
But I think part of this is gonna be talking about the new money we're getting, but there also could be new costs that we're
Well,
getting.
there are, yeah.
And
The
so,
bottom line, you're still getting more money, but not the 10 million everybody thinks.
but not to cover all the new costs. But yeah, I mean, I agree. And then the other question is, I know that the survey said that there wasn't, it was a 50-50 tolerance on a bond referendum, I believe.
There was not support for that bond.
So
referendum.
my question around the history of this district is fail first and then get it passed? So do we ask it to have it be the fail, or do we not ask it at all?
I think those who run referendum campaigns never recommend putting a question on the ballot for it to fail.
You just don't put a no question on the ballot for the sake of a no question.
Okay,
That's
that's-
what most people would tell you from a surveying side of things.
Okay.
I guess one of the questions I have is just, my concern when I saw the survey data was just kind of the response rate or kind of who the the group was that was responding and just whether that's representative of who's gonna be voting. So thinking about kind of the empty nesters and what their view on this might be versus people who have kids in the districts. Do we know anything about kind of how well this maps on to?
Weren't the respondents reflective of the district?
I thought it, I think it was a
They
lot
were.
of like
It was-
empty
yeah.
nesters, 55
Yeah.
plus people.
It
There was a.
On the survey.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But isn't that who our voters are? We don't, that's who
They
our
tried,
voters
the
are.
the
That's what I'm
demographics,
wondering what the.
the
yeah.
demographics that they ask questions to matched.
Match the voters.
There's
Yeah.
a, you know.
They take the
Right.
voter,
There's
they
a
take the
small
voter
percentage.
list. If I'm not mistaken, most surveying
Yeah.
people take the voting list and see what the demographic breakup is, and then try to mirror that when they
Well, and
survey.
that's where I wonder how.
Well, so that's
Yeah.
where we need to get
Vote.
younger
Right, how do we
parent
get the
voters
parents
out there to
voting?
vote.
Normally, if you get your parent population and your staff population to understand and to feel like they're gonna vote yes, you normally are fairly successful. Because they normally are able to have conversation with their parents, their grandparents, whoever else is along, that may be wavering a little bit. So that's why it's important that that communication process is pretty strong.
Okay.
So I guess that's the question is, do you want another layer or question or two asked in the survey above and beyond where we're at? We went to what we saw as the tolerance from the last survey and kind of placed that within this one to see if things have changed, but we can add another layer or two to it if you feel that's something you'd want to know.
Is us voting, or how we get to approve the other operating levy gonna affect this survey?
Well, that's what I was saying, there's kind of pluses and minuses to the board just approving some things.
Right.
Now, I think if it was that you had the ability to increase an expenditure, I would tell you, my take, it would probably play negatively into an increase. But since you're just renewing something, I think it has some negative impact, but I think it's less because most taxpayers will say, at least in my experience, a renewal I'm comfortable with because I've already voted.
I'm already
or
paying for
somebody-
it,
I'm
I'm already paying for it
it.
anyways.
It's when you do an increase, if you were just to say, hey, we're gonna automatically increase this by whatever, and that was by a board vote, I think you'd get some heavy pushback. That's just my take. I don't know
agree
the
with you on
community
that.
as well as everybody around here probably does, but that's, in most communities I've been in, renewals aren't necessarily 100% slam dunk, but they're normally pretty good because people are already paying for it.
I have a question. Why would you have more if the tax tolerance is the third one? Why would you?
Just
go
because
beyond-
from the little bit of conversation I heard here, I heard somebody or a couple of people ask the question, you know, what would you need or what would you go? I'm gonna tell you, we need at some point more than this, but I don't think we're willing as an administrative team to tell you that we need to push right now to get that. I think you're gonna have to take stair steps to
We
get there.
usually do, yeah. And tax tolerance is a pretty major thing. I'm not sure we should add any additional above the tolerance, although if they come back and of course, I expect towns to be even lower.
Well,
where
the
economy
tolerance is
rates
right in the
now,
middle of
But I don't know.
The tolerance is in the middle of 2 and 3.
Is what?
The tolerance was about $7.
It's right in the middle of 2 and 3.
Okay.
And so that's why we went a little bit above, because we feel like we can explain what those
Yeah.
particular areas would be in regard to staff, attracting, entertaining staff, and what we would do with student supports. I think those things are able to explain that, which maybe would give a little bit of a push above that.
Yeah, but we've also stuck to the tax tolerance amount, and it wasn't enough, and we had people really angry that we didn't ask for what we really needed, and that's why I asked that question.
So for, if we did ask for more, let's just say we did, do the people doing the survey, do they get upset about that if we ask for a little bit, just to see what they would say? I mean, do our survey,
You're asking if we can add a question?
Yeah, if we
Yeah.
did
Would it
do
negatively impact?
would it negatively impact decision, you know what I mean? Because if you're asking for too much, would that upset them if they were saying, well, let's just
I
go
don't
one
think
step
it would- I
further?
don't think it would upset them unless you got the results and it said don't ask for it, and then as the board, you're like, well, we're
did.
gonna ask for it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, that would
At least
make
that's
more
my
sense, yeah.
experience. I don't think it hurts to ask the
I
question.
mean, just so we
If-
knew.
As long as it's not, you know, you're going from $8 a month to $100 a month.
Right.
It's probably a little
But then-
beyond
Yeah.
that. You know, but if you're going from $8 a month to 10 or 12, you know, there's a balancing act
Right.
in that
Well,
question.
Well, and I think if we're
This survey's
asking that,
going to give different levels and ask how tolerant they are.
Yeah, and that's what
That's
these
what he's
are.
that's what these are.
Right, that's
That's
what I'm
what they
asking,
These are
want.
the
yeah.
areas that we kind of.
So I would
laid
like
out.
to, I would like to know.
Yeah, before
But
I
the
make
bigger
any kind of
question is,
decision,
if
I'd
we're
like to
going
know
to
that.
ask for another level, does there have to be an explanation to the survey person
Right.
about what that it would be
Right, yeah.
utilized for? Because that's what we usually do. If we ask for this much and you got this, how you feel? If we ask for this much and you got this much more, would we have another level of what we would use it for if we
Yes.
did?
And we did that in February.
Yep.
I know that's hard to remember way back
Yeah.
to February, but we gave the community of residents who answered the survey 5 different things on what they valued, and they ranked them. We would do the same thing this
Okay.
round. I think we proposed
Yeah.
4 different items that
Okay.
the administration assessed as needs long-term, knowing that Highview Elementary staffing is critical. And then Peter surveyed on a range that went up to asking for the max, like the chart that Bill showed, showing the other districts and the additional funding they get from our area districts. So I think that's another option. We can just have him resurvey those same ranges, and then we would be able to show you and confirm, or if things have changed, we'll see where the community lands on
Okay.
June 20th.
Good.
Was that what a majority of folks would like to see, that kind of retested back against what we did before? See, most heads nod. Because it doesn't lock you into anything, it just
It
gives you.
just gives us more
Right.
the
information.
feedback.
Right, yeah, this information, yeah.
And with adding an additional question, it wouldn't delay when we would receive the results?
No.
No.
Okay. Because I mean, right now, we've got a week from when we receive the results to when we would have to vote on it.
Right.
which is
And
a lot
we
of
can
time.
ask him to see how quickly, they don't want to rush it, but he gives you a range of time. And that normally for a number of questions, they say, here's how long, if you want to get this number of people, because not everybody picks up the phone the first time you call them. Okay, we will visit with them and make an adjustment.
Can I just add
Yep.
a couple of things?
Go ahead.
If you put up the timeline slide, based on what we're seeing in the legislation, the conference committee report has been published. Right now, you have until June 15th to adopt the renewal. So that does not fit in that timeline if you would want to do that through board action.
Say that one more time.
Have until
So-
June 15th.
The renewal,
If you wanted to adopt the renewal through board action, you have to authorize a resolution to do that by June 15th.
Well, that screws up stuff.
well,
Well,
Call a special meeting.
that doesn't necessarily screw up.
yeah.
Really?
We can walk through that. Did that, because I never saw that in the bill, that's
So
what
that
they
was-
clarified?
Yeah, the conference committee report was published.
Did it? Okay.
It's not been presented to the governor. They have done all the runs and.
Okay.
So that was
Thank you for that.
That was my question when I was
Yeah.
asking whether or not we'd have that information in time for that timeline. Okay, good.
Yeah, you have to hold a public hearing
Yep,
and.
Right.
yep.
the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I will also add that because your authority includes inflation, the final inflationary factor is published after June 30th. And so you can go ahead and move forward with a resolution at the June meeting, and then you'll just adopt a revised resolution in August when we have the final numbers. And it won't change the tax impact because it'll be the final inflation numbers kind of before and after. So it shouldn't move anything, it'll just different number on the ballot on which you're reviewing or revoking.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the policy review. Brenda, are you presenting that?
Yes. Okay, so the policy committee met, it was last week. Bree did join us for that. I went through a couple of policies with Bree that we would be bringing forward for approval at the board meeting on the, I think it was the, at our next board meeting.
Next week?
Yeah. Yeah, so, we have two that we'll be bringing forward, and Bree, I don't want to overstep, I don't know if you, did you want to discuss how the policy committee meeting went, so that the board
Yeah.
knows what steps we took from your point of view?
Yes, so it was good. It was good for me to sit in and listen on what goes on with your administrative meeting. So we were going through, and I think my eyes maybe got big a couple times throughout the conversation, just because when we were looking at just the red line and just what was all redlined, and just because of statute changes, that's, and just format changes, I think it was just really overwhelming for me to see. So when we were discussing just, you know, the verbiage and everything like that, we were talking about how, you know, would it be possible to do the statute changes prior to us seeing the red line? So then that was already done, and then we could get into the more content information. So I think for me, for me as the board rep going in there, was how would everyone feel about that process if we were to do that? Just because, you know, we talked about how if we saw this earlier, this would be shown, the public would see the entire red line information, which isn't a bad thing, you know, for transparency, knowing what's being changed in the statute and everything like that for the verbiage. But I mean, as for myself, just learning, I mean, it's nice to see it on my end, but I think it would be really overwhelming, you know, just coming from my perspective. I'm not saying that's, you know, everybody's view on what they think for the policies, but
Well, most things we wouldn't be able to do anything about.
right, with the statute, right, Brenda.
And so that was one of our questions, because when Bree looked at it, she'd be like, this is a lot of red, and we're like, that's our struggle is a lot of it's formatting and a lot of it's statutory. And so through our conversation, we said, well, can we check to see if legally we can just get the board to say, make your formatting changes. We don't care if you moved an indentation or did this or that with the
Or
numbers of
correct
it.
grammar.
As long as correct grammar. And so that would limit or change Board of Education and the school, you know, school board, that's a lot of what's on there. Not changing the renewal time of the policies, but doing some of those blanket adjustments that aren't really big things or that we're required to do. And then that takes a lot of the red line off it, so you can actually see what the policy is there without being intimidated by all the red. That's kind of what we felt would
I think it's a
be
good
easier for the
idea.
board to review.
I think that's a good idea.
But then we don't know what changed, right?
Well,
But
No,
we
because
shouldn't
we would
let-
still review the policy.
Okay, if
When
you review
when
it,
We would
let
still
us
would do a
know.
review of the policy. Well,
Yeah,
basically,
right.
what we would do is say, any of our policies that we have now that we know are not formatted correctly, or there's been a statutory change, we could make that adjustment, and then let's say we present to you, hey, next month, you're gonna have policy 1. We would share with you, here's what the statutory changes were, here's what else has been adjusted through MSBA or whatever else, so you would know what those things were. You just wouldn't see all the formatting red line, the school board,
The
the
spelling
Board of
and stuff
Education,
like
school
that.
board stuff would
Right.
be
I agree. What
removed
do you
out of
think?
there, so you wouldn't see all that stuff,
Yeah,
and indentation and stuff
Bree?
wouldn't be there as well.
Yeah, I want to know what you think.
So yeah, well, when I looked at it, I was like, that's a lot of format changes to a policy that I really don't need to see, you know, if it came to me, let's say a year later, and I didn't know that it looked like the prior, like what this one looks like to what it looks like now, I wouldn't have a choice anyways, because that's just the formatting changes. It was a lot. What I voiced was, we want to make sure we have that dialogue of what is happening in the policy, talking to the staff on how it's being implemented and how it's going and all of that. That dialogue we need to have. That's how I expressed it. But I guess for me, when I see like the simple grammar changes like that, especially if it's in statute. Now, one question I did have when I left was, is this MSBA as well, or is it just statute information? I can't remember what we talked about.
Sometimes it will be, so some of the language cleanup, like the grammar and the formatting, that is
Yes,
MSBA
okay.
recommended. The statute is
Statute,
statute, right?
yes.
So we have to put that in there.
Right.
Another thing is to keep in mind is because we are so far behind and some of these policies haven't been updated in a number of years, once we get through this whole cycle and get caught up, it won't be as messy next
Right.
time. There will be less red, less of the cleanup changes. So they'll be much easier to read and comprehend when you're seeing those red line versions compared to what they are right now.
Right.
A lot of times in my previous district, our policies were all up to date, and when we would do a policy update, sometimes there were 0 changes. So that should get better once we get through this cycle.
So when we were talking as you know, when the administration comes back to us, that they would still let us know what was what are the things that were changed in the grammar pieces. So we were still aware of that. It's just we wouldn't see the huge change in this, like, which one was it? I was like, whoa, those are just this indentation on these pages alone. That was a lot of
Yeah, so
format
just don't
changes
put-
that weren't,
Just don't put it in the consent agenda, not that we don't trust, just so it can be discussed for 2 minutes.
just for that discussion
And then,
piece.
it won't be a big deal. That's my opinion. but-
So it's basically what you're saying is that you just want them to change it and then give it to us as the clean copy, and then we talk about it?
Right, then we go through it.
At a working session?
Right, yeah, because the statute changes have to happen anyways in there, and that we
And the
can't change.
grammar changes.
And the grammar changes, right? I mean, but we can still review it, and we can still have dialogue on it and talk about it, and.
So the public knows.
So the public understands what's going on, you know?
I'm sorry.
I think for me, like, it's easier to see what you changed, so I know what was changed when I'm looking at it, but I'm a visual person, so, it makes more sense in my mind, I can see the work that you've done on it. And I guess if I don't know the changes that have been made, I'm just listening to someone tell me about it, like, it makes more sense when I can see it, but that's just me.
Well, I think
Right, that's why we
more
wanted to talk
important.
about it, to see.
Well, I think that's more important on the parts of it that they change, that would change the substance of the policy, as opposed to just the grammar and the format and the statute.
I can give you an example of one that will be coming up eventually, and that's our policy on Title IX. There were a number of very large changes to that when Trump took office. So that one will actually change how we do things procedurally. So that would be one that we would definitely, I would want to show you what the procedure changes are before I took that out, so that you could see that. Also, the copies that you have, I just want you to know that I didn't know I was going to be sharing these, so that all of my notes that are written on here were meant just for me as I was working through the policies, so if you can't read some of what I have there. But when we met with the committee and Bree was there, I walked her through, and I think Bree will continue to.
Yes, yep,
So,
yep.
I walked her through every single change and explained what that change was and what it meant, whether it was statutory, whether or not it was grammar or just language recommended by MSBA or formatting.
But so this one particular policy seems like there was a lot of changes made.
So are you looking at 616?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at my asterisks up on the top, the first one where it says advisory committee, so throughout the policy, I just asterisked this for myself as I was going through this, that advisory committee is being used in place of where they had before teaching advisory committee and site improvement panel. So that was changed throughout the policy, so there are a number of changes for the same thing. And then they also added K-12 throughout the policy. So it's Minnesota K-12 academic standards. So there are a number of changes throughout the document for that one change. And then they also changed, they updated NCLB, the No Child Left Behind. They took that out and added federal law throughout the policy because the NCLB doesn't really exist anymore.
That doesn't.
So there are a number of changes throughout the document, but they're the same few changes throughout the document. And then there were some formatting changes in this one too. So like Bree was saying, it looks like the whole policy was basically rewritten, but that's not necessarily the case.
I like your idea, Bree.
I mean, not everyone has that same view. I mean, because, I don't know, when it comes to law changes and things like that, I don't know if that's what the public wants to see either. They might want to say, hey, why were all these changes made? Maybe they want to contact the legislature at that point or something like that in that case. So I don't know if that works for everybody on a transparency basis. But for me, myself, it was very overwhelming when I first looked at it. And then after Brenda did explain what was being changed, it made sense. So that piece is there. It's just how do we want to go forth in the process of this?
I think we should have her explain what she just did in like 2 minutes. I think that would help.
Well, I think what for right now, or basically what you talked about, you would still get the asterisk things, hey, in this document, advisory committee was changed to this, the asterisk of K-12 was changed. So you would get that explanation, and that's what we would share during the work session. And then your formatting things, the way I understood it, we would just, your indentions, you're moving your paragraphs, that stuff would all be taken care of. And then, hey, here's your legal adjustment, that would be an asterisk. So that when we said, give to you the month before, hey, these are the ones to look at, you would know the month before you're looking at these policies, we'd be able to give you the asterisks of what's being changed before it would come to you before the work session. Is the way I understood we would try to walk through the process. So you would have all that, so when it came time to discuss those, you wouldn't be looking at all the red thinking what that issue was. You could actually be in the substance of the policy. That's kind of how I took what our discussion went.
That's what the basis of the
So the
discussion
reason
was.
of not providing the red line copy to the board is just that we can understand it better?
Well, it's the way, I guess the way we
Just
took
to
Ray's
have it more of the
conversation.
clean version of what the statute says and changed, and just for the formatting pieces, I mean.
But I think we're still gonna redline if they're changing something
Yeah,
outside
content-wise,
of-
yes, that doesn't change,
They're-
like, none of that
They're
changes.
just not redlining the formatting, the grammar corrections and
Yes,
the
this is
statute
just based on
stuff.
the statute, and if there was any type of formatting
Yeah.
changes. It's not, and nothing to do with the content, because we're still gonna have that conversation, and she's still gonna have, Brenda's still gonna have like the asterisk on there to show us that this is what was changed. But,
But any content
any
changes will
content,
still be
anything like that,
redlined.
that we wanna consider, or
Yeah.
looking at procedurally, how it's going, if there needs to be change, I think that still needs to happen, obviously within the board, and I don't know, with a committee, or however you wanna do that, or however we wanna do that. But I wanted to feel everybody else out too on your thoughts on just how this looks to you, how it feels, if you still want that transparency for your public to see this piece. That's why we're having that
I'm overwhelmed by it,
discussion.
and
Yeah.
the less
Well,
I
but
look
does
at,
the
the better
public
I'm
see
gonna
it
be.
from a working session? Because only if they're here, right? And then they get a copy.
Well, that's why
It's
I
not
mentioned
posted
it,
online, right?
Right.
that's why I mentioned I want it removed
They do,
and
and
make
they-
a special, like a 2-minute, 3-minute presentation at a regular business meeting.
Huh?
Not, you could talk about it at a work session, but they're not gonna see this, so I just would like her to say, these are some pretty major statutory changes, just so you're aware. I don't wanna put it in the consent agenda.
No, my question is, like, if we're talking about it at a working session, what's actually available to the public? Because I thought we only had to provide it if they were here in person for a working session.
Yeah, but if they're listening and they hear and they want to see the documents from tonight, everything that's been presented tonight are now public documents. So they have access to whatever we had.
So is that gonna put in the agenda when you send it out for the working session? Would this
don't
be
have
put in that?
packets
So
for
it wouldn't
work
be for that, so
Right, so it's
where
only
would
if
it
they
be put
ask.
then?
next week, when it.
Then it does.
When there's major changes, she still will fill out the packet.
Right.
Paper to explain that and give you the changes.
Right.
In your packet.
I almost feel
But
like
if
though
there's
for the
ma-
public,
oh,
this
excuse
would, it would be easier to absorb not all the changes in the statutory language.
And the
like
attorney that
it's-
we checked with after we talked about it said, absolutely. We're talking about the things that I talked about where we don't want to have revision that's a half a page like some districts I've seen. So I would move those to the very last page. That's where we see what dates we have it. Where it says school board, it will say Board of Education, you won't need to worry about that change. Where it's MinStat, and they want everyone is red line now to spell out Minnesota State statute, I would just do that pre-cleaning, but not the content or
The
the meat
content,
of it.
yeah.
If there's changes, that's for Brenda to look at as our committee gets together to review that and then share those changes with you. So I think when we talk format and grammar, it's minor, but it makes it easier for you.
To maybe answer David's question, if there's a major change in a policy, we don't approve it the first time around. We have 2 readings.
Right.
You have a first and a second.
So I think you're covered there. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're fine.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
still, we
if-
will still
Yeah.
do that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the people will see it in the packet and
Yep.
they'll have a month to be upset with it or happy with it or whatever.
This
Okay,
wasn't
that's
trying
right.
to circumvent anything from our, this was
No.
really just trying to clean up what seemed to be things that aren't really, you're not really gonna say, well, no, I don't want that paragraph indented, or I don't want that number moved, or I don't
I
want.
don't care.
It's harder
Yeah.
to see the content
Yeah.
of what's being edited.
Are these 2 any major changes on here or is this consent agenda?
It's just statute and
Okay.
minor grammar.
So we don't have, this doesn't have to be
formatting.
read twice. Okay.
But you explaining the advisory committees and what they mean, and they're basically the same, is huge, because it's not,
Right, and then
Or
they,
stated in the new
Because how would-
statute.
Right, because
How would you know?
Yeah.
right. Yeah, because they do add, like the advisory committee, they add a number 2 on it, and there is a section in there that they added, or they separated, you know,
Yeah.
when they put it in there, so.
Thanks, Bree.
Thank you.
Very clear.
So if nothing else, would you like us to try that and get that cleaned up, and so you can at least see what it would look like in compared to this?
And would that need to go for approval at the next meeting? Like, is
Well,
that
what we'll
something
have
they
to
need
do is
vote
at
on?
least get something in front of you, from my understanding from the attorney, that you as a board, you can vote on, hey, we want you to make this formatting adjustments, and the Board of Education, you know, he spelled it out and how he responded to Brenda, we'll show that to you, and then you can vote to have that done or not done. Because we need that be an action by you, we just can't do it without your approval.
Even grammar things, are action by us?
Based off of what your role as a board is.
Wow, okay.
You know, that's why
You're-
we
you're
asked to double
important.
check with you. Because we didn't want to put you or us in a corner that you couldn't do those.
We have the power.
yeah, I just said you were important.
Brian, any thoughts?
No, I think that's fine. That's good.
You sure? You don't seem happy. You don't seem happy either.
I like the red line copy, but I'm only one voice.
You can speak.
No, I mean, it's, the policies, I understand the intent. I mean, for format changes, if you want to go ahead and it's almost like a multiple stage gate approach. You know, stage 1 is you're cleaning it up and removing all the red lines so that we don't see it. Stage 2 is when you make the statute updates and the grammar updates. But I would like to see that as a red line, because I think it's still important to know, beyond the format changes, what are the notations for all the changes that were made. So that would be stage 2. As a group, we would generally go through that stage 2 process fairly quickly because there's statutory and grammar changes. Stage 3 would be where we would then review it from a language point of view. Is this in line with what we want? So it will take a little bit longer for a policy to go through its process, but in general, it provides more clarity, it provides more transparency for a community of all the red lines without a massive red line, but you're doing some pre-work, so.
Thank you.
That would be my preference, and when we get to a first hearing, that would be after stage gate 2, where we discuss if there's any language changes that needs to be done. Then we bring it to the board. Now, if we're looking to bring it as a first hearing after the statute and grammar stage gate, whatever, like, I don't think that's appropriate. So, those are my thoughts.
I guess for me, like, I feel like I'm out of the process when our whole, like, role is policy. And then I'm missing this step and I'm not seeing the changes that are made. Like, if we had a policy committee for our board members and I knew that we were looking at this and it helps for my understanding too, then I just feel like everybody's just kind of doing it and here you go, just approve, move on. Like, to me, I can see what was changed and it makes sense to me. If I don't have that, then I guess I don't.
Can we get general alignment where we don't need to see format changes and
Grammar?
And well, I do want to see grammar. If we're gonna get rid of the word which and that, I think that is in the spirit of being transparent for our community of policy updates, that ought to be part of it. But if you want to get rid of, if you want to make updates to the format, which I think is probably 50-60% of the red lines.
It depends on the policy.
Depends on the policy, it would clean up a lot of the red
Yeah.
lines. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's call that stage gate 1. You guys update the format and that's it. Stage gate 2 would be then you update the policy that has the statutes and the grammars as a red line. And then you bring it to us and say, hey, here are the
And
statutes.
then Bree would go to that meeting.
She can go to that meeting, but I still want to see it.
Right,
So-
right, I
right.
didn't say that, but
Yep.
then, like, I called Bree today and asked her how the meeting went, and she kind of gave me an
Yep.
update.
So stage gate 2 would be, she would be we would have that would be our first time seeing the document that would have the red lines for the statutes and grammar versions. And we should be reviewing that and ought to be fairly quick in its approval, all right? And so that actually would give us some time where maybe the following week, we then come back and say, all right, is there any language updates we want to make? Because you're dividing the statute, because you can't change the statutes, right? I mean, and the grammars are pretty minor. So if we can get alignment on the statutes and the grammars to be done, that gives us another week to actually then read the document, come back to the meeting, come back the following week and say, are there any language updates we want to make? And then if there isn't any, then we bring it to the board and then make the approval. It's a longer process, but in my mind, that seems the appropriate way. So,
The
those are my thoughts.
only thing I would say to kind of answer your question, Kim, if these policies were up to date, you wouldn't be seeing them all redlined anyway.
That's,
That's the only thing that was making the grammatical
Yep.
and the indenting change. If they were already up to date, the way they were maybe supposed to have been done, you as a board won't be seeing all of that red line stuff anyway, because it would have already been.
Right.
Where they're
Which
not
is-
up to date.
Yeah.
But they're not, so I would
So-
like to see.
So now's the time to go through the process, be transparent, and be very, very, in-depth knowledgeable of what's going on with the red lines. So, but that'd be my point of view.
I'm just gonna tell you from my vantage point, I've sat in several meetings with y'all looking at your policies, and I just need you to get on the same page. I need at least 4 of you to agree where you're gonna go, because right now, we're bogging down even more and we're falling further behind in the policy process. We were looking at a way, at least have a conversation that maybe would help, not necessarily speed it up, but give you some clarity to not looking at Board of Education being changed every time or an indention taking place every time. Because I don't disagree that if it's a statutory thing, we should probably highlight and redline that and say, here's what statutorily was changed.
Yep.
But changing these to those, the grammatical things and the indentions, to me, seem to be a little bit more. But if that's what you
Well,
want, again,
it's
we
the-
can do
It's
those
the
things.
indentions and moving things around that causes a lot of red lines.
It does.
So the issue is,
On
can
some
you-
policies,
On some
yeah.
policies. So the question is, can you do some cleanup work? I'm sorry, can we get some cleanup work done so that when when the board sees our first version of it, it's just statutes and grammar changes? That's my question.
And yeah, I would say yes, based off of what the attorney said.
Okay, and so then if that's the case, as a group, we would then agree upon, are you good with the statutes, are you good with the grammar changes? 95% of the time it's gonna be yes, and we're gonna just run it, approve it through, because you can't really make changes to statutes or grammar. And then the suggestion would be then the board would have another week to take a look at it, because it would be our first time looking at it, right? With the grammar, with the statute changes, but we would come back the following week and say, is there anything, any discussions you want to have?
Well-
Now that we've adopted well, not adopted, but we are generally aligned with the statutes and grammars that are associated with it.
To address your concern, I don't see providing us a red line copy as adding to any additional time, because that's what we've been getting. We get it, we look at it, and then it comes to the meeting the next week and we vote on it.
Yeah.
So it's just literally just looking at what copy do we want to look at, this copy or that copy.
I would tell you that it does take more work to redline all the grammatical things.
Yeah, if I could, just my input respectfully, the amount of time that it is taking to do policies in this district is astronomical compared to what I am used to in other districts. And don't get me wrong, I will do the work. I am concerned in my role and the function of work that I do that we are going to fall so far behind, and if we're adding more steps and more meetings on getting these policies done, I'm concerned that it's going to take a year or more to get all of our policies up to date. Do you know, Kim, off the top of your head, how many policies we have?
I think it's like 120. That'd be right, it's 40 a year we're hoping to get to.
So we
It's
haven't
more than that.
updated them previously to this year?
I don't know.
The last-
Some of the policies that I have been working on, it's been a number of years.
Well,
since
they were reviewed, but we didn't note that they were updated if there weren't changes made to them.
Okay.
But it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where we did the full review of all of them. But there's been a lot of changes and statute changes and stuff since then.
That's my concern, is are we out of compliance with anything, or, I
Yes,
mean,
we
that's,
are.
Yeah.
that's the piece of,
Yeah.
if 95, I mean, I don't even know if 95% would be an accurate estimate, but like, how much time are we spending and you're spending, when we could be focusing more on the meat of what we want to be doing with the policies?
For
Well, we
example,
probably
the,
don't- Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the Title IX policy, when that comes around, like I said, there will be a ton of changes to that you will see, and our procedures will be different. So we are out of compliance with that policy. However, if we had a Title IX complaint, we would have to disregard the policy and follow the statute. So that's one example.
And it just doesn't look, I mean, I remember looking at the bullying policy and being like, this hasn't been revised for however many years, or it isn't consistent with, and so that's where I would be of the opinion that we let some of that up to whoever does those, and to your point of just not having the statute language be what we focus on, because that's not what we can't do anything about that.
And some of that was the way I understand it. The policies maybe were looked at, but it was never notated that it was reviewed or revised.
Sure.
And so it looks to the public like
It looks
you've got
bad.
some policies that haven't been looked at for 10
Right.
or 15 years, when they've been looked at, but they just weren't,
It wasn't
it
noted.
wasn't
Wasn't
labeled
documented.
Because they were
as
all
being,
reviewed.
being done. And we're not gonna go back and change all those things,
Right.
but that's what we have to try to get caught up on, because I think that it does create, so the Title IX policy we did 3 years ago in my last district. As soon as it happened, we were already there making that adjustment in
Right.
Title IX, because you have to follow that process, otherwise you're out of compliance with federal law, and that creates issues for us. So we'll do what we need, what y'all want us to do, but I just know that we're also a little bit behind the 8 ball on some of these things in regard to where we are, at least how it looks by how some of our policies are listed as the last time they were reviewed or revised.
So I guess my concern would be, I don't like rushing things and moving through things, but I also want to make sure, so something happened here where we didn't get this done. So the process that we have in place isn't effective as far as going through our policies and making sure they stay up to date. So if we vote and say, yep, you can go ahead and do this now, how do we keep this from happening again?
I think that what you are doing right now is our step to keep us from going back to where we were, because I don't know what was in place before I got here. That's why we're trying to get these
Okay.
new steps and procedures into place so that we can keep them up to date.
And remember, we're gonna be giving you an outline of here's the policies that we're gonna review over the next 3 years. So as we work through that process, you're gonna be able to see have these things been done so that they stay in link and step of what needs to be done so you don't fall behind in that process.
And that was put into place, it was, well, prior to COVID, I believe, to the year before, a process in place to have them reviewed in a schedule that, and it was gonna be over a 5-year time frame, which we have shortened to 3 years. And so it was, these policies are reviewed and updated during this time, and that process was just being built and started when everything went sideways.
So I think the overall objective is to, how do we make this easier for the board to digest and to read and so forth. So I view the cost of to do this process is just the cost of doing the job, doing business. I mean, it's just what we have to do. But having you do the formatting and so forth, I have a tough time justifying maybe what you're being paid or what the compensation is for your particular role, making format changes and so forth. And so is there a way that we can share some of these responsibilities to maybe like an admin or something like that? Someone, I mean, if you're, I don't know what your compensation is, I apologize, but it's like, you probably shouldn't be here in Word doc making changes, if that makes sense.
So Kim has volunteered
Okay.
to take care of the formatting changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that knocks off that issue. So
Right.
then the second issue is, then when you get a cleaner version, then you're going to compare and contrast with the state statutes and the grammar. Okay, and so that would come to us as a red line?
Right. I
Okay,
think that's what you're
with
asking.
potential notations around here's the changes and blah, blah, blah.
State
so-
and federal.
All right, state and
State
federal.
and, right.
So then, so as a group, when we get that first version, are you guys okay with this process so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get a red line version of the state statutes and the grammar changes, and then I'm assuming we would all say, hey, we agree with that conceptually or directionally it's correct, or there's nothing we can change, we're good. And so at that time, we can decide, do we want to talk about the language in addition to the state statute changes, or do we want a week later to then digest, review it? There are some policies that are probably much lengthier than others, I don't know, so.
I don't think I'd have the background to suggest language changes, because I don't know.
Because
The attorneys and the law,
The statute
what?
changes. The first time you're seeing it will be the statute red
Yeah,
line
but I mean,
version.
I don't know what language changes I would make, because I would think we'd have to go through an attorney to see if it's okay.
Well, no, that's after the fact. I think the issue is once the first pass is you're agreeing to the statute changes, the
Yep.
red line changes.
Yep.
Okay, that's what you're agreeing to. The second pass is, are you agreeing to, is there any other changes in the policy that you want to make changes to or make recommendations to? That's the second pass. And once it passes the second pass, then we bring it to your board meeting and say, here's our first hearing or first.
Can we do step 1 and 2 at the same,
I think there'll be
Here's
instances
the
where
only
you
could
could.
challenge
do
you
the
have
same
to that.
time?
You as a board can't say this passed unless it's a vote.
Oh,
So you
agreed.
can't do those things
Yep.
in a work session.
Yep.
But I think you can take a look, we can provide it to you in the work session like we have talked about.
Yep.
Hey, you're gonna get a list of things in advance. You're gonna get things prior to the board meeting, so you'll be able to see it. You'll have that work session discussion of, hey, what are the questions about the language or whatever? And if there aren't any questions, then we're gonna assume that the statutory stuff is okay. And I hate
Yep.
to assume, because you know what that does. But if there aren't any major questions, because it's just semantics with your language. I want to make sure the public understands. You're not going to be approving, hey, this language is okay unless it comes to the board for a vote. At the work session, it'll look like it's all right. Then you'll have that week from the work session to the board meeting. If there's something else that seems to be an issue, because when it comes to you, you can then say, hey, I'm not ready for this because I've got some other language things or something I want to take.
Yep.
Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
That's what I'm thinking, that's where I would like to go. And it sounds like it's gonna go slow, but think of it like a rolling wave concept, where eventually we'll have enough policies that are kind of in the pipeline that we'll just kind of, every week, we'll be like, policy
But if we're
review.
giving it to you the month in advance to say that these policies are coming, you should already be able to also take a look dramatically at the policy prior to the work session. So if there's
And putting
something,
your
so if there's
input.
something that's there, you should have the ability to say, hey, I've got a question about what do you think about this language? You don't necessarily have to wait to the action of that. Because that's what I understood you as a board wanted, is that we're gonna try to give it to you the month prior to it
Yep.
being there.
Yeah.
So you're gonna know these policies are coming, you can look at them. We'll have the formatting stuff taken care of so that when you see it on the week before, that'll all be taken care of, and then you'll just see the statutory red lines, the grammatical red line, and then you'll have already worked through, hey, my questions of language or things that you can talk about at your work session. It's kind of how I
Also,
understood what you
my-
were gonna do.
And I understood it like that, except that I thought that when you give us a month ahead of time, we submit our questions and language concerns and stuff, so when the committee is reviewing it, it's all going into consideration with the committee before it comes to us.
That, if that's doable, I remember hearing something like that.
Yeah.
Because that would
And that's-
help us, but.
Yeah, and that's what we had talked about from a timing perspective, so.
But we're just gonna have to give it to you far enough in advance that you're
advance.
not,
Yeah, you're
that you're
giving us
not
the
getting it
schedule.
a week before
Yes.
the committee meeting.
And
You'll
right.
get the schedule, and we'll try to get things to you
And I
far
don't
enough
want
advance
to
that
be
you can
throwing
do that.
stuff in it after it's been at the committee, because we're supposed to be looking at it proactively and submitting our recommendations to the committee to review on a whole for us to get that to look at for the first reading.
So here's what I'm gonna condense it down to make sure we're on, right, I'm looking at Kim because she's taking notes. Is that we're gonna try to
I've
give
lost
you,
it.
yeah, we're gonna try to give you that list of policies in advance, like the month before.
I like it.
And then from that, you'll be able to take a look at those policies and look for language and send some questions to us. We'll try to give it to you several weeks in advance of the committee meeting.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring to you next week the language that you can vote on as a board that says just make the formatting changes
Grammar changes.
and those type of things that, where you place the word revision and revised on the document, that's all formatting. You get to decide if you want us to just do that, so you're not gonna have all that other red line.
Yep.
But then when we present to you during the work session, you will see the statutorial changes and any grammatical changes, so that you'll have that the week prior to when it would be on the board agenda. Is that what I've understood?
Yes.
Sounds like a
Yes.
plan.
That works for me because like I said, it feels rushed and I want time to look at it and I need time to understand it because, like I said, as a board, that's our calling is policy and making sure we understand it and that we're helping the district with it, so. I like that.
Are you making the statutory
Again,
changes
just me.
before you share it with your internal committee, or?
With the policy committee?
Yeah.
No, the policy committee is reviewing the statutory changes.
Got it.
Yep.
But she'll
Well, you're
notate, should
making the
notate what
changes.
those statutory
Yeah.
changes are,
Yeah.
or Kim does if she gets something from MSBA. So when we sit down as a committee, we know what those things are.
Yep.
So that we can take a look at them and say, this is ready to go to the board for them to take a look at. You'll get it at that work session prior to the regular board meeting.
Is that
Well-
still creating extra steps for you?
That's a normal part of.
That's how we do it right now.
Are there instances where the statutory changes are going to be more drastic than the original policy version? So if I'm reading
Well,
policy
she
six.
said that, like if
Right.
it was
Title
like
IX one.
like a big change.
Like
If it
Title
is,
IX
if
is
it
the
is,
big
then that's
change.
something that's going to probably have to come for you for a first reading.
First
If
reading
it
is
changes the
okay.
intent of the
So
policy.
so this goes back to then, give me the statutory version first, and then I can review the language, versus the other way around.
But I would say if you know that that changes the intent, we're not gonna be asking you from the work session to the next meeting to approve it. You're gonna have from the work session to the next meeting, hey, this is our first reading, what questions you have?
Okay.
Then you
Yeah,
got a
a
whole
month
nother
later.
month before it goes to the next
Right.
reading to go through what I think you were just asking, if
Yeah.
I understood it correctly. Would that be right?
Yeah.
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 Because, we're
That
not
makes
gonna
sense.
you can't rush from one week to the next.
Yeah.
A major policy, it's gotta go through multiple steps in the revision.
And you've got help with this.
What do you mean?
Do you have help going through all these policies? Because we've got 9 different series of policies, and
The policy committee, I will bring in, like, for instance, our immunization policy. I'll loop Dave in to make sure that he's aware of statute changes and is there anything that we need to fill in staff on.
but are you the only one
I am the
doing
only
it?
one that works through the policies.
Got it.
She and Kim.
Yeah.
Yep.
In reality, with the 3-year cycle that we created, it would be like 38 was the goal for this year that we would be reviewing. That's about 4 a month for 10 months, hoping to have December and July of not doing policy work.
Okay.
So that's what I mean, we're getting further behind, so we have to shift all of the dates to try to get caught up if we can still do it in 3 years. So we just have to keep it moving forward.
Well, I would like to put that in our policy 200 series where we do review all policies every 3 years. Every single one of them should be reviewed or looked at or checked off or signed off.
Well, we have some policies that need to be reviewed.
Some
annually.
They have to be reviewed,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
And then just one thing I would ask you to keep in mind is that if you are wanting to make language changes to the content of the policy, keep in mind that I will need to research that most of the time.
Yep.
To make sure that it is not changing the intent or that it's not contrary to the statute that might already be in the policy. And I may also need time to consult with legal counsel depending on what it is that you're looking at changing.
Okay. And just to clarify, as you're making updates to the policy, you're referencing MSBA, and we are adopting or agreeing that MSBA's interpretations of the statutes is accurate. And so you're not reading the state statutes yourself.
No, so sometimes, most of the times, I am going in and looking at what has changed in the red line 4 statute.
Yep.
To find the statute that is coming from.
Okay.
Yeah. But MSBA has a team of legal counsel that works on policy. They know what they're doing. I'm just going in and checking what it is that MSBA is sending us, what is language, what is statute, and noting like I did on the copies that you have in front of you.
I personally like the notations. So I know it might be tedious, but it's like,
Well, I will.
I appreciate your
nota-
notes.
Yeah, the notations are for me, so that
Yep.
when I'm writing your board report, I know what to put in it.
Yeah.
So I will continue to do that, it just won't be in
Yeah.
this messy format,
No,
that's
I
all.
like it. All right.
Good.
So we good with that?
You know
Everybody
where we're
understand?
going? All right, Kim, shake your head.
Okay. We're good, all right. So last item that we have on there, was the board calendar review, and the reason that I put this on there, I know we talked about having a working session, and, last time you decided, not a working session, like a board retreat, and last week you decided to do like a couple marathon sessions. I guess I'm asking like, which ones are we deciding that are going to be marathon? Because like a board retreat would be about 4 hours. So if we do like
Well, I
a
don't-
session that's 4 hours, like what would be the difference? And if we did, could we try to condense some of our meeting times, I guess?
We've never had all the meetings in July or August, so.
No,
No, like
never.
we agreed to last time is that we would just keep them all posted and decide if we don't have anything substantial to meet for, we would just cancel
So it could be your discretion to cancel
But
it then.
I'm thinking the work sessions, if we're gonna talk about levies in the fall, or referendums in the fall, we're probably gonna use some of those.
Well, I'm not thinking about canceling any of the work sessions. I'm thinking about doing like a board retreat where we had like 4 hours and canceling some of the board development sessions. And then
That's
we're just replacing them with like
that's-
that board retreat time so that we could work on like the
That's kinda what I
superintendent's
proposed
review
last
and
time.
all. Right,
Yeah.
like, so that we have time to do it, because honestly, like, our board development is for our development, but also for us working together, and if we had a chunk of time where we could work on those things together, because I know Judy's done a lot of work on some of this, I think that would be a better use of our time.
I totally agree. And we talked, I think, about setting up some board goals and superintendent
Yeah,
goals,
those
that
things,
kind of
yes,
thing.
things that we need to
And
need
then
to work on
do it on a
that we
half
haven't.
day and,
Stretch of time.
and.
We need a stretch of time to do it,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then dump the rest of the professional developments for the summer.
Yes, that's what I'm asking about.
I agree with you.
All right. I know I know that your time is precious and that everybody works, so what would be a good day looking at our calendar for the summer on deciding a day that we could do like a 4-hour stretch? The calendar's actually in your folder. Thanks, Kim.
It's only in yours.
Oh, it's only in mine, sorry.
'Cause
I
they
have
got
it.
They got it
One
last
of
week.
Yeah,
the
I
things
got-
that I remember them saying is, if nothing else, pick one of the already existing dates.
Yep.
And making that a longer period of time and see how much you got accomplished to then determine what you were able to.
Take one of those dates and start earlier. We picked one of those and say just start earlier.
Okay.
What did you say?
Pick one and start earlier is what she said.
For which one?
Any day.
Like the 13th you're saying?
Where'd you guys get the
Or
calendar?
earlier than that?
Do you have a
I
calendar?
didn't keep my
They
calendar.
were last, I gave you copies last week, so.
Is it in here?
Sorry.
No, because I gave you copies last
That's
week. I thought maybe you'd bring it back for this conversation.
I never bring anything back.
I'll put a copy in your folder for
Bree
next
sharing with me.
You guys decide I'm retired. I'll work around, whatever.
If you want to tell them what the dates are that you have.
So, if we're taking
So,
out,
wait, is that what we're opting to do then, that rather than a 4-hour half day?
a late night one instead of a 4-hour half day?
She was recommending a 4-hour retreat.
Yeah,
Yes.
During the day, yes?
yeah.
I would prefer evenings. Order a pizza, have a Coke.
Could we do a middle ground, like
We do a
you
weekend?
said, starting earlier? Because I feel like if we start at 6 and go till 10, it's gonna be ugly. From like 9
We do a weekend.
to 10.
We could
Okay,
do a
so is the
weekend.
4-hour half
Like in the
day
summer
off the
we'll be-
table or no?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
How about a Saturday morning?
Come on. I get one morning, seriously.
I'm
Yeah,
really
but if
thinking
you're-
that people have Tuesdays already blocked,
you bring
right?
donuts.
Like, that's like the assumption. So what if we just started, I don't know if you could leave at 3 or 4 or something, or we could take off work early.
In the
start
summer,
early.
I'm more flexible to do that because I run like ESY and that's in the morning, so.
We could do, you could, I don't know. like-
Brian, what's your availability?
Yeah,
Like
what's
if we
your
did from like
availability?
4 to 8?
Yeah, I can always catch up. I mean,
4 to 8?
We'll have to find a date and.
Have a little lunch in between? Or
Well,
during?
dinner.
Dinner.
Little dinner.
Time you eat lunch.
For me, I'm really flexible because I'm off in the summer, so
Ooh, good.
whatever.
That's helpful.
So
See?
for me, I'm really flexible.
I won't say you suck.
I got kids,
won't
I
say-
got
I
kids
won't-
that
I
can
won't say you-
babysit,
I
so.
won't say you suck.
Dave doesn't work, so he can show up anytime.
Judy, would that work for you?
24/7, buddy,
Like 4 to 8?
24/7.
Yeah, I can even do earlier if we want.
Okay. I could do earlier too, but I don't know about Brian's.
How about you?
Yep, I'm totally
Or Carly's.
flexible.
We'll have to find
I
a
can
good
make
day.
it work.
Are you talking about
Four-
June
Have to
13th,
take
so
off
I can
work.
double check that the room is open?
Well, so I'm gonna ask about that because thinking about June 13th, that's
It's right
like
after
after our
graduation.
marathon days of graduation, so keep that in mind too.
Yeah, I don't think that's a great date.
For what?
Right, cause
For
it's like
the-
right after
'Cause we have
graduation and we'll be there for like
82-hour graduation.
I
6
know.
hours.
You may even grow some hair by the time
I
you're done.
doubt it. Grow a beard.
What's the next date?
The next, like, well, we have a working session after that, so we wouldn't wanna, because we're working
No.
on other things, we wouldn't wanna do that date, but it would be like July 11th.
I'd start 9/17 that day.
That's
so-
Panaprag.
I start 9/17 that day.
Okay,
school
so
board.
let's just agree that it's like June 13th. Let's just, right?
We're
We'll
gonna
just
what?
marathon, June 13th.
June
June
13th.
13th?
It's a Tuesday, yeah.
We
Sounds-
can order some yummy food to make us all happy.
Right, we'll figure out food.
I'll bring candy.
Kim is gonna look at if the room's available. And then, so then we'll cancel the next 2 board development sessions, which would be July 11th and August 8th.
I still have to go to the school board meeting on the 11th.
You might want to keep them.
We want to
You volunteered.
keep them on the
And
calendar.
cancel
Keep them on,
Support-
and
You
then,
get big,
support me.
you get big bucks
Pay
over there
big
too.
bucks.
Honestly,
Right?
just keep them until we get closer.
Are you sure? Even the Panaprog one?
Well,
So what is the proposal? June 13th?
June 13th is a marathon.
What?
June 13th,
June 13th.
like a
4 to-
board retreat.
4 to 8 or something
Yeah.
like that? And then we're gonna take off the next 2 professional development months?
Well,
I'm getting ready to leave, Dave, we got a closed session.
Oh, sorry.
so we're
No,
gonna,
we're
we're gonna
just-
leave them on the calendar, but in our minds, we're going to think that if we don't have anything, that those are the ones that will
Let's
be
do it.
canceled. Does that make sense to everybody?
That's what they said, 4 to 8, June 13th.
Awesome. All right. so we're going to
A closed session.
adjourn this session and move into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 3B to engage in negotiations discussions.
This has to be taped.
Yep, do we have a recording device, Kim?
Yep, Kyle is bringing it in.
Okay. Yay.
We're good.
We can,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, yeah, you want to take a 2-minute break if people need to
Yeah.
stretch their legs, and we get the recording device from Kyle.
They're looking
And now we're off.